Those are not my words, those are the words of the late, great Zig Ziglar, a great motivational person, and he wrote those words regarding the death of his own daughter. C.S. Lewis wrote in his book, The Grief Observed, he points out this fact, that all relationships come to an end. They end in either death or divorce. And instead, what we need to do is think about our relationships like bookends. They all have a beginning, they all have an end. And by extraction, you can say couples that were together and they choose to no longer be together is a mild form of divorce. So the feelings and the thoughts are the same. Well, good afternoon. My name is Chip Holt. I'm one of 3 facilitators that are here today, and we are affiliated with 2 caring ministries, one called Grief Share and the other one called Divorce Care. With me today is Jenny Hodgson and Mike Fritz. In a little bit, Jenny's going to talk about the Grief Share program. Mike's going to talk about the Divorce Care program. But I thought I'd give you a little overview about what these ministries are all about. This ministry was developed by an organization called the Church Initiative, and they are located in Wake Forest, North Carolina. They are an international group, and they provide a tremendous amount of resources for people who are struggling. They have these 2 programs, and they also have another one called Divorce Care for Kids, which is a companion program to the Divorce Care. And then they also have another program called Single and Parenting. They provide tremendous support to anyone that signs up and becomes part of that particular ministry. Both programs, as well as I believe the others, are also designed the same way. They're built around a 13-week cycle of subjects. The subjects are all independent from one another, and you can go ahead and attend one, miss a couple, and come back. We don't advise that, but it can be done. And likewise, it allows people to join into the group at any one particular time. I have currently going on a Grief Share group, and we are at session number 10. And I got a call the other day from someone who was really hurting with grief, and I encouraged this person to come and join us on session number 11 as we get to the program. We've had people join at session number 13 and come back again when we do it again. I'm very enthused and very excited about this ministry. We've been doing it here in the Bemidji area for close to 5 years. And I've been involved with it all the time. And in my particular faith walk, my journey, I've had the opportunity to experience both divorce and death. So I'm a facilitator for both particular programs. To become a facilitator, all you really need to have done is walk the journey of grief or walk the journey of divorce and have recovered from that particular sad event in your life. To date, we have had nearly 200 participants go through this particular program, and we offer something called Surviving the Holidays, which we offer at Thanksgiving and Christmas time. They're one-day events as opposed to the 13-week session that we have. So I'm going to quit talking now and let Jenny talk to you about Grief Share. And then what she's going to do, Mike will talk about Divorce Care. I will close us off with a little summary. And then we're going to open it up for Q&A to you folks to answer any of your questions, some of the things that we've learned. I also want to point out one thing that's very important, that as facilitators, we are not professionals. We're not therapists, we're not psychiatrists, we're not psychologists. Some of us are in ministry in other areas, but we are just people who walk the journey. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny.
Thank you. As you said, my name is Jenny Hodgson, and I have led 5 Grief Share groups. The first one, Chip helped me with training as we facilitated together, and then I've led groups since then. Let me begin with 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 3. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion, and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort that we ourselves have received from God. So the requirement of having experienced grief, I think that's just part of living, all of us. will experience grief in one form or another. And every experience of grief will be different for us. And each individual, their experience is going to be different as well. None of us grieve exactly the same. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important to meet in a group, because you can find that you can help others through their grief as well. And as we share our experiences, we receive the comfort that God has given us. Grief share for me was a thing that I was drawn to when our first granddaughter passed away after 2 days. And going through that experience, I experienced a lot of the things that were talked about in the sessions of grief share. There were about 2 months that I don't have many memories of. It's just that grief was such a shock that there's times in your life where you'll just not remember some of the things that went on. There'll be times when things are very cloudy or dark. And this curriculum talks about that. There's 3 areas that the grief share provides when we go through it. There's a workbook that every participant receives, and in the workbook there are places that you can take notes from a video. Each session there's about a 20 to 40 minute video depending on the day and the topic, and it is filled with God's Word. It is filled with reminders from God's Word, which at times when we're in the midst of grief we forget, or we doubt, or we're not sure of. And so as a group, you'll watch this video and then talk about it. Go through the notes together. Talk about what things hit you, what things ministered to us, what things spoke to us, what things are we not really sure about. So there's that discussion that you get to have with each other. And as a facilitator, many of you in your churches, if you are looking at people in your church that are grieving and there isn't a group in your town, this is a good group to start. It's got the curriculum already set. It's got the video teaching, and you just need to facilitate. It's important to have a partner to facilitate with, to have somebody there alongside, and it's not that difficult to get one started in your community. Just order the curriculum, have the DVDs, the workbooks, set a 2-hour time and a place, advertise it. There's a website that GriefShare has that gives you a lot of resources and brochure printouts. It'll give you the PDF where you can enter your information in there, where your church is or where you're going to go meet and what times you're going to meet, who's a facilitator, and make these available. And you can print these yourself. Just adjust them, print them, make them available in the communities, in your church, at the hospitals in your communities. Fortunately, Sanford Health here knows about GriefShare and refers many, many people to GriefShare. It's an international organization. It's used all over the world. People can go onto the computer and just plug in the GriefShare whatever it is, org, and put in a city, and it will tell you where the nearest meeting is, where the nearest group meets. And there's a lot of towns in northern Minnesota here that don't have a grief support group. We don't have to be professionals, like Chip said. We just need a caring heart, an understanding of grief, and the willingness to walk alongside some hurting individuals. Some of the groups that I've led have been 6 or 7 people. Some have been couples that have lost children, spouses who've lost their loved ones, individuals who've lost their parent or a best friend or a sibling. So anyone who has lost somebody can join and participate in the Grief Share program. And ideally between 7 and 9 people is a good sized group, but I've also led individuals through the DVDs and the workbook as well. And I think one of the most important things about our workbook is that once you've gone through the DVD and discussed it, there's 5 days of work to do in here. It's like a little workbook. 5 days, there's some scripture for you to read and for them to read, and information for them to start thinking about it personally and how it's affecting them. And then when they get back together again for the next session, you talk about your week work that you did. And they call it your grief work, because grief is work. It's not easy to get through it. We have to be intentional, especially if there's people that are really struggling in their grief and not able to pull themselves out of that pit. Many topics that they talk about are listed in the brochure, and we've got the brochures in the back if you want to grab one for your church so that you've got information. It has the website on here. These are the ones that have been made up for Chip and I when I was leading one on Mondays, and it gives you an idea of what it would look like with your information on it. And I think the most important session is the first one, when people get together, and it's titled, "Is This Normal?" And so often in the midst of grief, we feel alone, and we feel like there's not anybody else that really knows what I'm feeling. But I think one of the most relieving things for the participants is when they start to hear each other, they start to recognize that what they're feeling is normal for grief. There's a lot of things that are normal for people to deal with in their grief. And it deals with each of those throughout the sessions. They talk about guilt and anger and getting stuck. What does that look like? How do you know if you're stuck? How do you get out of it if you find yourself stuck? And how grief affects our relationships. Because it does. So we thought it was really important for us to give this information out to you, and so that for you and your communities and your churches, you can have all the information you need to get started. And a number of the people that talk in the videos are very well-known theological people or psychologists. There's Ruth Graham, Joni Eareckson Tada, Larry Crabb, Erwin Lutzer, Ravi Zacharias. There's a number of well-grounded biblical scholars that talk about what does the Scripture say about grief? What does God say about grief? And the website, if you're going to facilitate a group, the website has a leaderboard that you can have access to that has many training resources, things that will help you walk through that first session. Also information on how to promote the session and get the news out that you're having a 13-week session. And in the book, there are also specific articles, particularly about forgiveness and about helping children through grief. So there's extra resources in there as well. And then, as he mentioned, surviving the holidays. Thanksgiving and Christmas, and sometimes Easter, can be the hardest time of year when you're dealing with grief. Because oftentimes, those holidays are spent with the people that you love. And when they're not there, it's really hard to celebrate. So surviving the holidays is something that anybody in a community or a church can get the information for, and the DVD session is available. You can lead that with a group. It's just a 4-hour.
Not even quite that long.
Not even that long.
About 2.5 to 3.
Okay. And it talks about how do you prepare for the holidays? How do you deal with the loss of energy and not being able to make it like the holidays that you've always known. How do you make new traditions? How do you find a new normal? It's really very beneficial, especially at the end of the year through Thanksgiving and Christmas. Okay, I'll give this over to Mike and let, oh yes, and there's a little promo video that will show, that'll kind of wrap up the grief share session.
Share is a support group ministry that helps people heal from the pain of grief. The Grief Share video seminars, workbook exercises, and small group discussions give participants encouragement, useful advice, and hope.
The videos, they're very believable. It just seemed like regular people speaking from the heart. They helped me focus my thoughts.
Having many different people on the videos from week to week makes a huge difference. The video strengthened me.
The way I grew up, people had a funeral, they went to somebody's house, ate a lot of food, and you never talked about it after that. And to be able to sit in a small group and hear people actually express what I was thinking and feeling was quite refreshing.
I needed to be in a situation where I could talk freely about my feelings and my grief, and not feel like that I was causing other people to be uncomfortable. My workbook helped me to unravel the feelings that I was going through.
I found that the workbook was so helpful in that while the video I was watching it, I could make notes.
It helps me go back and remember how God can help me.
If you know people in your church or community who are grieving the death of a loved one, tell them about Grief Share, or visit a Grief Share group yourself to heal from the pain of your grief. And remember, no matter how long ago you lost your loved one, you are always welcome at Grief Share.
There was such a void until I got into Grief Share. Grief Share has been a big help and encouragement to me.
Grief Share brought me out of my sadness.
Begin your journey from mourning to joy at Grief Share.
We give Chip an extra allowance to run the AV stuff, so as he serves through that. My name is Fritz. I'm here to talk about divorce care, and I suspect most of us here know individuals who've been divorced, or may have been through the unpleasant experience of being divorced. It's a very real thing, and divorce care, like Grief Share, has a lot of the same components. I find it interesting that where the Grief Share is kind of orange, the divorce care is blue, and I don't know if there's any significance in that color scheme, but that's that's the way it is. Just like Grief Share, divorce care is also 13 weeks cycle. And if you take some time to take a look at the brochure, on the back there they give some of the topics that are covered. One is what's happening to me, the road to healing and finding help, facing my anger, facing my depression, facing my loneliness. These are all pretty heavy topics, and when you stop and think about it, they're topics that, whether divorced or not, that are important. What does the owner's manual say? Because this is a Bible-based, Christian-based program. and I really appreciate that. There's a session on new relationships, financial survival, kid care, single sexuality, forgiveness, reconciliation, and moving on and growing closer to God. So as tough as divorce is, there is hope. And for those who come and attend, that's an important piece, is knowing that there's hope and that you're not alone. You're not the only one going through a very, very difficult time. And as been mentioned on the DVDs, they present experts, ministers, Christian counselors, and cover a lot of the topics I just mentioned. During the week between meetings, group members complete a daily Bible study and practical exercise to help them heal from their hurt and pain. Divorce care is for people who are separated and divorced. If a single person showed up who did not fall in those categories, it's not for them. It's for those that are separated and/or divorced. I've been involved with divorce care now going on 4 years, I think this summer. I've been to Hippie twice, to Holt divorce care, and we're in the middle of wrapping that up right now. We're on session 12. I've been to Nevis once, and then the rest of the time here in Bemidji. So we're doing what we can to get the word out to the community. We're going to take a look at our promotional DVD now, and then I have a few more things to share.
Going through separation or divorce is painful and traumatic. Unfortunately, few people understand what you're going through, and even fewer know how to help. That's why there's divorce care. Divorce care is a comforting 13-week group led by caring people who understand what you're going through. Each week, you'll watch and discuss a video that offers hope and practical tips that you can use to stabilize and move forward. Plus, you'll receive a helpful workbook that gives you insights on how to survive a divorce. It also contains the inspirational stories of others who've survived situations similar to yours.
My anger drove my wife away. I found peace at divorce care.
I thought a new relationship would heal my pain. I found comfort at divorce care. Divorce care kept me from making decisions that I'd later regret.
I found the answers I was looking for at divorce care.
When you walk into divorce care, you're home. So join the group today and find
Help, hope,
And healing.
at divorce care.
We do have some sample brochures in the back there. We also will have a workbook if you want to take a look at that. That has been mentioned, shows the different sessions as well as what they call On My Own, which is many participants who attend will take time during the week to review the Bible verses, the questions, the challenges that are presented there. So I'll encourage you afterwards to take a look at that. On the brochure, there's some testimonies in the back. I promise it will be worth it 100 times over if you just take the leap of faith and go. Divorce care was a very positive experience for me. Painful, oh you bet. But in divorce care, I finally had people to talk to and listen who knew exactly what I was going through. I did not want to go, not at all, but it was the best thing I ever did. So divorce care has had a profound impact, and having been involved for over 3 years now, you get to see some real lives changed. You know, the first session, they're just, and a couple sessions later, it's got, oh, I can't miss, I gotta be there. I'm just learning so much. I remember one participant who, at the very end, shared how on her drive home, which was like a half hour, 45 minutes, she called her girlfriend up. It's like, oh, guess what I learned tonight? And she would just was really, really blessed by the program. And I suspect the same for grief share participants as well. Some of the things that are required of the participants is that they divorced or separated. We've also seen singles come who've been in a relationship, and so regardless of the circumstances by which they come and attend, we don't turn them away. We're very, very okay with that. The only thing we will do is not let a husband and wife who are going through a divorce attend the same meeting, okay, for very, sound reasons. Or if there's a parent-child, we don't want family members together. This is for them alone and for them to share. And you'd be surprised that even though there are men and women there, you think some women would hate the men and the men hate the women. And there is some of that goes on, some of the feelings that go on during the divorce. But we all get along just very extremely well. The leaders, ideally, the leaders are two, a man and a woman, and those are the ideal. The leaders are required to have experienced divorce and healed from it, okay? And that doesn't mean there's no more feelings. There's a difference between being raw and being healed. And the leaders need to have gone through it, and they're doing fine. They're doing okay. And I think preferably, because this is a biblically based, Christ-centered, it's good to be a believer, to be a Christian, as part of leading. Some of the things that leaders are encouraged to do is to welcome everybody. Everybody's encouraged to share, but they don't have to. They can just come and listen if they want to. It is not a counseling session, and it is not wise for the leaders to offer advice. That's what counselors are for. That's what pastors are for. And so if someone comes and says, hey, what do you think I should do? It's like, watch the DVD, take a look at the biblical principles, and if necessary, refer you to someone who can provide you that. A lot of confidential issues with the group. It's not our place to tell someone else's story, and so that's something everybody needs to be. They are encouraged to do their on my own exercise during the week, because that will help them experience more meaningful healing. Silence is golden. It's good sometimes for leaders to listen, just to listen. And there are opportunities for the leaders to share some of their story and journey that they've been through. Divorce care is not a place to debate theological issues. Okay, we're there to help and to heal. I think I've covered everything. As we mentioned, there'll be some Q&A at the end there, so I really do encourage you to ask questions of both the divorce care and the grief share. It's our hope for those here and people we know to recommend grief share, to recommend divorce care. If it's something that you qualify to be a leader and would like to start at your church, let us know. We will do what we can to help make that happen. So with that, Chip.
There's a couple of interesting statistics and a couple of interesting experiences that we have all had here. In dealing with people who are going through divorce, there's an interesting statistic that says that roughly 51% of all marriages fail. And the staggering part of that is it does not matter whether they are churched or unchurched. 50% of all marriages in America fail. People who don't take time to heal and go through the process and do it right away, get into another relationship, that marriage, over 70% of those will fail. Why? Because they never took the time to heal. Now let me tell you what the number looks like when they get married a third time. Excess of 80% of those fail. It's a staggering number. But the whole point of this is that you have to take time to heal, which ties me back into both programs, share this in common. And that is, many of the participants come into either grief share really hurting or into divorce care really hurting. And they expect Mike and Jenny and I to give them a pill, make the pain go away. The problem is, it doesn't work that way. What really is required is each individual participant to put the work into it. That's why these workbooks were designed, and that's why these midweek exercises have been done. And in fact, we find that as people progress through the program, those people who have applied themselves to the healing process, for some reason or another, you just see a change in their entire being. They're not so down in the dumps. Oh yeah, they're still grieving or they're still hurting from their divorce. But somehow they start realizing there's a better way to handle this. I can tell you, with the grief share group, it appears somewhere between between session number 4 and number 6, varies a little bit. Like I said, the pain isn't gone, but people have now applied themselves have got the tools to get through it. So those are just a couple of learning experiences that I've had. But I want to talk about something else today. And this is something that is really the fundamental to our entire group. With grief share, this is a fundamental thing on which everything is based. It is important that we recognize that there is no such thing as stages. There was someone who wrote a book a number of years ago having to do with people who are dying of terminal illnesses and said you go through these particular stages as if it's a linear progression. You do this, you graduate, you move on, you do this, you graduate and move on. It's not that way at all. And instead what we do is we talk about the tangled ball of emotions right here. And this is right out of the workbook in the first session. And we talk about it, it's not like a ball of yarn or string or anything that's wrapped around itself. All of these are interwoven. You pull on one, you move something else. So we deal exclusively with this idea, the tangled ball of emotions, and how it jumps back and forth. And how we think we make progress in one particular area, then only to be ambushed by our grief at another time. I think that's the most fundamental thing of the program. The next one is this thing. It's kind of hard to see, but it's actually a roadmap. And we call this the Reconciliation Trail Guide. And this occurs later on in the program. After they've been given some fundamentals and are dealing with things, we get them on this road called forgiveness. And from there, we move to something called conflict. And we try to get to the point where we can resolve some of the conflict between the two warring parties, because believe me, that's what it looks like going through divorce. And they follow the path up to something called Camp Civility. Yeah, I don't know who made up these names, but I didn't. But Camp Civility is a place where you and your former partner can get to the point where you can have logical, decent conversations, not only about your divorce, but about the situation that you may find yourself in raising children. And here's the fundamental difference that we talk about in divorce care. We say that reconciliation does not necessarily mean restoration. There's a difference between reconciliation as opposed to restoration. So what we try to do is get people to the point of Camp Civility where at least they can have some kind of function as mom and dad dealing with the kids. And if they're so inclined or over years, that may change. And they may move to where they have friendship involved. In my particular case with my first divorce, I'm at that point now with my first wife because we have a daughter together. And now we work together very hard as she grows into adulthood. She just had a birthday on Friday. She's 38. Finally, we get up here to actual restoration of the marriage, and that may or may not be possible. If infidelity was involved with the breakup, it's really difficult. It's one of the barriers. The other person may have already gotten into another relationship and may indeed be married. So in that case, restoration is not at all possible. So those are the two major features of the two programs that we've talked about and we stress. In the summary, I want to talk to you a little bit about, there's a young man on the video. He's wise beyond his years. And he makes this comment, and he says, you know, he says there's a difference between moving on and moving forward. And he goes on to say that moving forward implies that you're taking something with you. Moving on implies that you're leaving something behind. And how many times do we hear that phrase? We hear moving on versus moving forward, and we confuse those. I like to associate it this way. In a moving on scenario, I refer to that as the divorce, or leaving that relationship behind, and moving on into the future. Moving forward implies that you're taking something with you. I lost my fiancée to cancer. And I am moving forward with her in my heart. Just like people in our group who've lost a spouse or a child, they will always carry that memory in their heart. It never goes away. You just learn how to carry it more gently and in a very special place as you go through the healing process. And eventually you get to the point where, when I think about my loved one, I start thinking about the humorous times together instead of the depression associated with the death. Moving on and moving forward. Finally, I want to talk to you about loneliness. This is of my own thinking as I reflected on my journey, as I came through it. There's a difference between aloneness and loneliness. I can remember in the heat of my loss and everything else, someone came up to me and they said, who should have known, said to me, asked me how I was doing, and I said, well, I'm doing okay with the loneliness, but the aloneness gets to me now and then. And this gentleman who should have known better said, oh, I don't see the difference. I got a news flash for you. There isn't a single participant that hasn't come through both divorce care and grief share that can't define that difference. I was kind of somewhat offended, but we've learned that sometimes people, well-meaning people, will say hurtful things. Aloneness and loneliness. And my thinking came about as a result of reading a book by Father Henry Nouwen. I'm a big Henry Nouwen fan. He has a tremendous book called The Inner Voice of Love for people who are dealing with depression and sad events in their life. It's his journal of his own recovery from depression. But then he wrote another book called The Wounded Healer, and a lot of pastors and people in leadership positions have written that book. Have read that book, rather. And in that book, he talks about something called loneliness. And he describes loneliness as something that's big in our hearts. Cannot be filled. It's like the Grand Canyon. And it comes about as a result of our life experiences, our rejection, our abandonment, maybe some other negative events in our lives. And the problem that we make for ourselves is we expect another human being to fill that Grand Canyon. That's why my marriage has failed. Because I expected somebody to fill the need that only Jesus Christ can fill. When you take a look at it and the experience and you think about the Grand Canyon, I've flown over it thousands of times, I've visited it a couple of times. And the interesting thing about the Grand Canyon, if you want to run with this idea, is when you get to the Grand Canyon and you decide to take the tour and you go down, you're walking down through layers and layers and layers and layers. It's kind of like going through your own research of the issues in your own life. And what do you find when you get to the bottom of the Grand Canyon? The Colorado River. Water. And when you get down there and you see that water, it should remind you of the waters of your own baptism, that you are not alone, that Christ is with you. And now, rejuvenated by that thought, you begin the long climb up and out of the valley. Aloneness just merely means the fact of learning what it's like to go out to a restaurant and have to sit alone at the table, or be at home dealing with sitting alone at your own table eating your dinner, or like I do, sit in front of the TV all the time. So aloneness and loneliness, they're two very different things. And I think we leave our folks in both grief share and divorce care, we leave them with many good ideas on how to survive and move forward or move on. And so without further ado, I think we'll turn it over to you for questions that you might have. And feel free to either ask myself, Jenny, or Mike, whichever you feel. If you have any one particular program, please identify which program you're talking about so I can kind of clue in on it. So, are there any questions at all? Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you, Jim, Jenny, and Mike and Chip for your service in this way. The Lord has glorified your work, so thank you. Mm-hmm. My question is, how do you best advertise this? Is it primarily through the local church? Is it through small groups? Is it through newspapers? Through radio? How do you generate effectively the most participants?
Do you want to answer that? Sure.
We get a mix of individuals who will attend because they caught it on the web, or a friend caught it on the web and say, hey, man, you need to go. There are plenty of, we've seen participants show up with clippings from the newspaper. You know, this is why I'm here. I saw there was going to be Surviving the Holidays. And she comes with it all clipped out, and then she stays on for the full 13-week program. Personal referrals. Yeah, my friend said I had to come, so they come. And so all of those things just come together. Chip here has been on the local radio promoting both grief share and divorce care. I don't know if any of you have heard that. But so radio, web, referrals, paper.
Yeah, and the other thing is this organization is so well done. There are tremendous resources that you can download from them. And once you get signed up with them, they give us what's called a leader guide. And the leader guide is very explicit on how to set it up, how to get your advertising out, where to put it. They even provide some of the scripts for you. So the organization provides tremendous support. As Mike said, I've been on your QFM 3 times or so. And I always visit with Phil when he's here at these events. Ads in the paper are usually very effective. One of the things that I did do is the folks at Sanford Hospital asked me to come over and talk to hospice caregivers. And when I talked with them, gave a couple of presentations to their caregiver, their hospice people, they were kind enough to put my name on their website. And that has got kind of a dual-edged sword because I frequently get calls from South Dakota and North Dakota wanting to know if our group is meeting. And usually when I see an area code I don't recognize, I say, where are you calling from? Well, I'm from Sioux Falls. Okay, let me help you. So I get them to the website page. Sometimes I'll sit at my computer with them on the line and I'll say, what's your zip code? Okay, there are 3 groups meeting, here they are. That's usually one way to do it. So contact with hospice. Believe it or not, the funeral homes here in town, Cease and Olsen Schwartz, have also been very, very good. At Christmas time, they always like to have a community remembrance service. And Kevin has had me come and lead that service twice the last 2 years. And that's another great way to get the information out. So that's one of the possibilities there. So really there are endless ideas that you can come up with. So anyone else? Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes, sir.
I was just wondering, you talk about moving on and moving forward. And you talk about moving forward is carrying something with you. When do you stop carrying that thing? I was just wondering. And you gave a good example, though. You talked about somebody passed away, a spouse passed away, and carrying that spouse with you in your heart. When do you stop carrying that person?
You never do. The short answer to that is in this scenario, someone that you've known and loved, your mom and dad, for example, you'll always think of them. That relationship, that memory is there, and it's carried at a very special place in your heart. You never carry it. In some ways, you never totally stop grieving, but it's a different kind of grief. Now you celebrate that life, you celebrate that time. My fiance and I were together 13 months before she died of cancer. And I carry that memory, that special time together now, 6 years later. But she is still there with me. Likewise with my mother and father who died 90 days apart, I carry that memory. My brother, my nephew, uncles, aunts, they were all part of who we are. And so I always carry that forward with me. There have been many times I have said, gee, Dad, I could really use some advice here. You know, that kind of thing. So it just changes to a different style. Never really goes away. Anyone else? Oh, sure. You know, two things. You never want to hand me a marker for a dry erase tool or a microphone. So.
Also, another thing to think about when moving forward is the intensity of that grief will change over time. So that grief will be with you, but that intensity and the consumingness of it will change.
I think, are we out of time?
We have a 3-minute warning.
I'm sorry. What is it?
3-minute warning.
3-minute warning, okay. Does that mean we don't start counting until I start talking or something like that, like football? I don't know.
Different story.
Are there any other questions that you might have? I can tell you that from a facilitator standpoint, I can't speak for Jenny and I can't speak for Mike, but it's a tremendously rewarding experience to watch people come in who have dealt with grief or divorce and watch them go out the door on their own and able to move forward. Yes?
Do you have support group for the children?
For children, not for grief, but there are resources. Are you talking about grief?
No, divorce.
Divorce. There is a program, it's a companion program. With divorce care, the organization offers divorce care for kids. They refer to that as DC4K. And it is a companion program that occurs the same subject, same time, everything else as divorce care does. Okay? And the reason we don't offer it is we don't have the resources. We don't have the people to run that door. We have the daycare, that kind of thing. So it really, the larger churches, you know, I jokingly say, and I'm really quite serious, that this program was founded down in the southeastern part of the United States, where there's a 4,000 member Baptist church on every other corner. So they have some resources there that we just don't have. But I understand it is a very good program and it's a companion. So as the parent is going through it, that same lesson is being addressed to the children so they can talk about it. I've heard through the grapevine that Grief Share is going to do the same thing. But I haven't heard anything more about it. Okay, anything else? All right, well, very good. If you